They never taught you this in school. No one sat you down and explained how narratives are built, how emotional conditioning works, or how quiet men became the collateral damage of modern social programming. Instead, you were handed a script without realizing it. A script where men are expected to perform, provide, entertain, absorb pressure, and disappear emotionally. And if you step outside that script, if you choose solitude, discipline, or independence over validation, something strange happens. You are no longer seen as neutral. You are seen as defective. Somewhere along the way, single men stopped being viewed as individuals and started being treated as problems. Not broken in a technical sense, broken in a cultural sense. Society doesn't openly say it hates single men. It doesn't need to. It teaches it indirectly, through movies, through social media, through dating culture, through jokes, through silence, through the way people look at you when you say you're not chasing relationships right now, through the way confidence in solitude gets reframed as arrogance and boundaries get reframed as insecurity. And most people participating in this system don't even realize they're doing it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women were not born disliking single men. That attitude was learned, conditioned, repeated until it felt natural. From childhood onward, the story is always the same. A man's worth is measured by how desirable he is to women. A man without a partner must be lacking something. He must be immature, emotionally unavailable, socially awkward, or secretly dangerous. Meanwhile, women are taught that being chosen is validation, and that men who don't actively pursue them are either losers or threats. This didn't happen accidentally. Modern culture runs on attention economics. Validation is currency, desire is leverage, and loneliness is profitable. Social platforms amplify narratives that keep people emotionally reactive. Dating apps reward surface-level judgment. Entertainment industries romanticize toxic dynamics while mocking quiet strength. The message becomes embedded everywhere. A man alone is suspicious. A man focused on himself is selfish. A man who doesn't compete for approval is broken. So when a woman encounters a man who is calm in his solitude, who isn't chasing, who isn't begging for attention, it creates cognitive dissonance. He doesn't fit the pattern she's been trained to recognize. And when something doesn't fit the pattern, the brain looks for explanations. He must be hiding something. He must be insecure. He must be undesirable. He must be emotionally damaged. This is how perception is engineered. Not through logic, through repetition. Every romantic comedy portrays the single man as incomplete until a woman fixes him. Every viral clip mocks men who don't have dating success. Every advice channel tells women to avoid emotionally unavailable men without ever asking why so many men withdrew in the first place. Every social narrative frames independence as avoidance. What never gets discussed is the pressure. What never gets discussed is how men are taught to suppress vulnerability while being demanded to provide emotional safety. What never gets discussed is how constant rejection, comparison, and performance-based value slowly erodes a man's sense of identity. So men adapt. Some become loud. Some become bitter. Some become numb. And some go silent. The silent ones are the most misunderstood. They don't broadcast their pain. They don't explain their boundaries. They don't argue online. They simply step back. They stop playing the game. They redirect their energy inward. They build. They train. They read. They work. They sharpen themselves in isolation. And this is where the narrative becomes dangerous. Because a man who no longer seeks approval threatens a system built on attention. A man who is emotionally self-sufficient cannot be easily manipulated. A man who is content alone doesn't respond to shame tactics. So he must be reframed. He must be pathologized. Suddenly he's labeled avoidant. Suddenly he's accused of misogyny. Suddenly, his solitude is interpreted as hostility. Suddenly, women are warned about him, not because he's done anything wrong, but because he doesn't perform emotional availability on demand. This is psychological projection. Society teaches women to equate male pursuit with safety. If a man isn't pursuing, he feels unsafe. Not because he is unsafe, but because he doesn't conform. So narratives fill the gap. They say he's emotionally stunted. They say he's afraid of commitment. They say he's broken. But the truth is far simpler. Many men didn't withdraw because they hate women. They withdrew because they were exhausted. Exhausted from being valued only for what they provide. Exhausted from competing in environments designed to commodify affection. Exhausted from being told to open up emotionally, then punished when they do. Exhausted from carrying expectations while receiving conditional respect. No one talks about how many men learned silence as survival. No one talks about how many men stopped dating not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. They realized that peace was more valuable than validation. They realized that modern relationships often demand performance instead of partnership. They realized that building themselves quietly produced better outcomes than chasing chemistry in unstable systems. But instead of honoring that evolution, society reframed it as failure. And women absorbed that framing. Not maliciously. Conditioning doesn't require intent. It only requires repetition. So now we live in a world where a woman can feel instinctively uneasy around a man who is simply minding his own business, where male independence is interpreted as emotional unavailability, where boundaries are mistaken for detachment, where discipline looks like distance. And men feel it. They feel it in conversations. They feel it in dating spaces. They feel it in how their silence is judged. They feel it in how their calm is misunderstood. They feel it in how their standards are criticized. The irony is brutal. Society tells men to work on themselves, then punishes them for doing exactly that. It tells men to become confident, then labels confident men as arrogant. It tells men to be emotionally intelligent, then weaponizes vulnerability. It tells men to be strong, then resents them for not needing reassurance. This creates a psychological trap. Men who comply become drained. Men who resist become demonized. And women, caught inside narratives they didn't consciously choose, begin reacting to men not as individuals, but as symbols. The single man becomes a walking projection screen. He represents unresolved fears. He represents rejected norms. He represents independence in a culture addicted to validation. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because when a man doesn't need external approval, he exposes how much everyone else does. This is why quiet men are often labeled cold. This is why disciplined men are seen as rigid. This is why emotionally regulated men are called distant. They reflect something others haven't yet developed. And reflection feels like judgment. So hostility fills the gap. Not overt hostility. Subtle hostility. Side eyes. Assumptions. Passive comments. Online narratives. Dating advice that warns women away from men who don't chase. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes emotion. Emotion shapes behavior. This is how programming works. And most people never realize they've been trained. The tragedy is that many women genuinely believe they are responding to red flags, when in reality, they're responding to conditioning. And many men internalize rejection that was never personal. They think they're defective. They think they're unlovable. They think something is wrong with them, when in reality, they simply stepped outside a broken system. They chose depth over dopamine. They chose growth over approval. They chose silence over performance. They chose solitude over chaos. And that choice carries a cost. But it also carries power. Because once you understand this dynamic, something shifts. You stop trying to explain yourself. You stop seeking validation from people who don't understand discipline. You stop internalizing narratives designed to keep you small. You realize that your value does not depend on how easily you are consumed. You realize that being single is not a deficiency. It's often a phase of construction, a recalibration, a return to self. And the men who survive this phase emerge different, sharper, calmer, more grounded. They don't chase energy. They attract alignment. They don't beg for attention. They command respect through presence. They don't argue with narratives. They outgrow them. This is the part no one tells you. Being misunderstood is often the price of becoming powerful. And if you're a man walking this path, feeling unseen, mislabeled, or quietly judged, understand this. You are not rejected by life. You are removed from noise. You are not broken. You are becoming.